I still hear his voice. Cold, sharp, final. "Soraya, you're fired." The words hit the air like a gunshot in a cathedral. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it. That maybe the fluorescent lights were playing tricks on my ears, that the stress of the quarterly review had finally scrambled my brain. But then I saw their faces. 100 employees, frozen, mouths half open, coffee cups suspended midair. The entire conference room had turned into a wax museum, and I was the exhibit everyone was staring at. My husband Adrian Chen, CEO of Lighthouse Media, the company we built together from nothing, from a Brooklyn apartment with secondhand furniture and dreams bigger than our bank account, stood at the front of the room. 6'2", Armani suit, that same jawline I used to trace with my fingertips on Sunday mornings. He looked like a prosecutor delivering a death sentence. "You've undermined this company's leadership for the last time," he continued, his voice projecting across the room with the kind of authority that made investors write checks. "Your insubordination, your refusal to respect the chain of command, your personal vendettas against hardworking employees." I felt my chest tighten. Personal vendettas. He was talking about her. Melissa Hartwell, 26, blonde highlights. The new senior creative director who'd been at the company for exactly 8 months and somehow kept presenting my campaign strategies in executive meetings, word for word, slide for slide. I'd brought proof to Adrian 3 days ago. Timestamps on my files, email drafts, everything. He'd looked at me across our kitchen island, the one we'd picked out together at that overpriced furniture store in Soho, and said, "You're being paranoid, Soraya. She's talented. Maybe you're just losing your edge." Losing my edge. I'd built the creative department. I'd landed the clients that made us go from 6 figures to 8. I'd worked through 2 miscarriages, through my mother's funeral, through nights when Adrian was too busy to come home. And now I was standing in front of the entire company, being erased. "Effective immediately," Adrian said, "you are no longer employed by Lighthouse Media." Someone gasped. I think it was Monica from accounting. She'd been at our wedding. The room started to blur at the edges. Not from tears, I refused to give him that, but from something else. A strange hollow ringing in my ears, like the moment before you faint or before you do something you can't take back. I saw phones rising. Recording. Of course they were recording. This would be on Slack within minutes. On Reddit by lunch. Adrian stood there, hands in his pockets, waiting for me to scream, to cry, to beg. That's what he wanted. The final humiliation. Proof that he'd won. I picked up my leather portfolio, the one he'd given me on our 5th anniversary, engraved with, "To, my partner in everything," and I looked him dead in the eye. "All right," I said. Just that. 2 words. Calm as Sunday morning. For the first time since he'd opened his mouth, Adrian's face changed. Just a flicker. Uncertainty. Maybe even fear. Because he knew me. He knew I didn't do all right. I fought. I argued. I burned things down when I had to. But this quietness? This was new. I turned and walked toward the glass doors, my heels clicking against the marble floor we'd picked out together when we renovated this office 2 years ago. Every eye in that room followed me. I could feel their pity like heat on my back. I reached for the door handle. That's when the lights flickered. Just once. A quick stutter in the overhead LEDs, like the building had hiccuped. A few people looked up, confused. I didn't. I pushed through the door and let it close behind me with a soft final click. In the hallway, I stopped, pressed my back against the cool wall, let myself breathe. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer, Richard Chen, no relation to Adrian, thank God. "It's done. Paperwork filed. They'll receive notice at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Call me." I looked back through the glass at my husband. He was already turning back to his presentation, to his slides, to his company. His company. He had no idea. He had no idea that 3 years ago, when Lighthouse was drowning in debt, when investors were pulling out and we were 30 days from bankruptcy, I'd made a call. One call. To my Uncle Thomas, the one Adrian had always called your weird hermit uncle who got lucky in tech. Thomas had wired us $2.3 million, enough to save everything. But Adrian never asked where the money came from. He was too busy being grateful, being relieved, being the hero CEO who turned it all around. He never read the fine print. He never saw the holding company, the trust, the quiet, invisible architecture I'd built around his dream. The paperwork Richard just filed? It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a transfer of ownership. As of 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, I would own 67% of Lighthouse Media. Adrian would own nothing. I pushed off the wall and started walking toward the elevator. My reflection caught in the polished chrome, same dark hair, same sharp cheekbones, same woman who'd walked into that conference room 20 minutes ago. But different. Behind me, through the glass, the lights flickered again. Longer this time, and somewhere deep in the building, something fundamental began to shift. The smell of burnt coffee still takes me back. That tiny Bronx apartment, 4th floor, no elevator, the radiator that clanged like a ghost at 3 a.m. The window that faced a brick wall so close you could touch it if you leaned out far enough. That's where it all began. Adrian and I had been married for 2 years. We had a futon that doubled as our couch, a folding table from IKEA we'd assembled wrong twice, and a laptop held together with electrical tape. But we had something else too, a dream. Our dream. I can still see him sitting on that futon, his eyes bright with possibility, sketching out ideas on the back of pizza boxes. We're going to build something that matters, Soraya, something that changes how people connect with stories. And I believed him. God, I believed him so completely it hurt. So, I worked. I worked my marketing job at a pharmaceutical company during the day, then came home and coded until my eyes blurred. I taught myself web design on YouTube. I built our first website, our first client portal, our first pitch deck, all of it, pixel by pixel, while Adrian networked at industry events I couldn't afford to attend. I didn't mind. That's what partnership meant, right? I remember the night we landed our first real client. A boutique agency in Tribeca, $15,000 contract. Adrian picked me up and spun me around in that cramped kitchen until we knocked over a stack of dishes. We ordered Thai food and ate it straight from the containers, sitting on the floor because we still didn't have proper chairs. We're going to make it, he whispered against my hair. You and me. Always. Always. When his mother got sick lung cancer, stage 3, the medical bills came like a flood. Adrian was drowning in guilt, paralyzed by the numbers. His father had passed years before, and she had no one else. I didn't think twice. I took out a personal loan, emptied my savings account, the one I'd been building since I was 16. Every birthday check, every tax refund, every dollar I'd squirreled away dreaming of maybe someday opening my own firm. $47,000, gone in 3 months. But she lived. She got to see us move into our first real office. She got to hold my hand at her son's first big investor meeting and whisper, "You're the strong one, sweetheart. Don't ever forget that." I didn't forget. When Lighthouse started growing, really growing, Adrian needed a COO, someone with experience, with an MBA, with the kind of polish that would impress the venture capital firms. I had all the qualifications. I'd been running operations from day one. I knew every client, every contract, every line of code in our platform. But Adrian's advisor, some silver-haired consultant from Manhattan, pulled him aside after a board meeting. I wasn't supposed to hear, but our office walls were thin. You need someone from outside, someone who makes you look like you're scaling up, not keeping it in the family. Optics, Adrian, it's all about optics. That night, over reheated Chinese food in our new Brooklyn brownstone, the one we'd just closed on, the one with the garden I'd already started planting, Adrian looked at me with those apologetic eyes. "It's just temporary," he said. "Just until we're established. Then we'll restructure." "I promise." I said okay. I always said okay. So I stepped back. Took head of creative instead. Smaller title. Smaller salary. But I told myself it didn't matter because we were building something together. Because the company's success was our success. I kept working late, kept landing the clients, kept putting out fires and covering gaps and doing the invisible work that holds everything together, the work nobody notices until it stops getting done. I gave up sleep. Gave up hobbies. Gave up the novel I'd been writing in notebooks since college, the one that sat in a drawer collecting dust while I wrote copy for energy drinks and crypto startups. I built his dreams while letting mine collect dust. I told my best friend Maya once, over wine at a bar in the West Village. She'd looked at me with such sadness. "Soraya, when does it become your turn?" I'd laughed it off. "It's our company, my turn is his turn." But even then, something flickered in my chest. A tiny ember of doubt I refused to acknowledge. There were signs, small ones. The way Adrian started introducing me as my wife at events instead of my co-founder. The way he stopped asking for my opinion in meetings. The way his eyes would glaze over when I talked about strategy, like he was humoring a child. And then Melissa arrived. Young, hungry, the kind of polished confidence that comes from never having to prove yourself, never having to build something from nothing. I watched her watch him. Watched him light up when she entered a room. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was being insecure. I told myself love meant trusting even when it hurt. If you've ever given everything to someone who later turned away, you'll understand this part. You'll know that particular kind of exhaustion not in your body, but in your soul. And maybe you'll understand why I kept going, why I kept believing, why I kept building his empire while mine crumbled. Because when you love someone, truly love them, you believe the best version of them will eventually show up. You believe that loyalty means something. You believe that sacrifice will be remembered. I believed that until the moment he fired me. Until I realized I'd been building my own cage, brick by brick, with my bare hands. The burnt coffee smell fades now. What remains is something else entirely. Something colder. Something sharp. I wasn't supposed to be home. That's what made it possible for me to hear everything. It was 11:47 p.m. I'd told Adrian I was staying at Maya's after the firing needed space, needed air, needed anything but the suffocating silence of our brownstone. But I'd forgotten my medication, the prescription I needed for the migraines that had been splitting my skull open for weeks. So I came back. The house was dark, except for the light bleeding from under his office door. Our office, the one we'd designed together, with the built-in bookshelves and the vintage desk we'd found at a flea market in Hudson. I heard his voice before I reached the stairs. Low, intimate, the way he used to talk to me. Don't worry, baby. Once she's out, you'll take her place. Head of creative, corner office, everything. She won't be a problem anymore. I froze. My hand gripped the banister so hard I felt the wood grain press into my palm. I know, he continued, laughing softly. It was painful to watch, but it had to be public, had to be definitive. The board needed to see I was serious about restructuring. The board. Our board. The one I'd helped assemble. Melissa, listen to me. His voice dropped lower, syrupy. This is our time now. I've already transferred the intellectual property. Your name's on the New Vision campaign officially. As far as anyone's concerned, you created it. The migraine that had been building behind my eyes exploded into white-hot fury. My campaign. 6 months of work. The pitch that had landed us a $4 million contract with a streaming platform. I had the sketches, the drafts, the emails. He'd given it to her. He'd erased me and written her in. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just stood there in the dark hallway of the home we'd chosen together, listening to my husband promise my life to another woman. When he finally hung up, I waited, counted to 30. Then I walked into that office. He looked up, startled. Guilt flashed across his face for maybe half a second before it hardened into something worse, annoyance. What are you doing here? I live here, I said quietly. Remember? He stood up, closing his laptop like I was a stranger who'd wandered into a private meeting. Soraya, if you're here to cause a scene. The New Vision campaign, I interrupted. You put her name on it. Silence. You put her name on my work. That's not... He ran a hand through his hair, that gesture he always used when he was about to lie. That's more complicated than you understand. There were optics to consider, team morale. I heard you, Adrian. My voice didn't shake. I was surprised by that. I heard everything. His face changed, calculating, cold. Then you know it's done, he said simply. You're out. The company's moving forward. You can make this easy or you can make it ugly, but the outcome's the same. I stared at this man. This stranger wearing my husband's face. How long? I asked. How long what? How long have you been planning this? He didn't answer, didn't need to. I saw it in his eyes, the answer was long enough. I thought about the documents I'd been locked out of 3 months ago. System error, IT had said. I thought about the board meeting I'd been uninvited to because of a scheduling conflict. I thought about the signatures on contracts I didn't remember signing. You forged my signature, I said, the realization hitting me like cold water. The equity restructuring last quarter. I never signed that. You need to leave. His voice was flat now, done pretending. You rewrote me out of my own company. My company, he corrected. It was always mine. You were support staff, Soraya, a very good assistant who got ideas above her station. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Support staff. 10 years, 2 miscarriages. My mother's funeral where he didn't show because of a critical meeting. Every late night, every sacrifice, every piece of myself I'd carved away to make room for his dreams. Support staff. Get out of my house, he said. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I didn't know this person. Maybe I never had. But he didn't know me either. He didn't know about Uncle Thomas, didn't know about the holding company, didn't know that the support staff he'd just dismissed had been holding the keys to his kingdom the entire time. I turned and walked out of that office. Behind me, I heard him exhale relief, probably. Thought the problem was solved. I walked past the kitchen where we'd celebrated our first investor meeting. Past the living room where we'd mapped out 5-year plans on a whiteboard. Past every ghost of every version of us that no longer existed. And I felt something shift inside my chest. Not breaking. Hardening. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply that their betrayal made you question your own worth, you're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not the problem. I wasn't the problem. I was the reckoning. I got in my car, drove 3 blocks, and pulled over. Then I called Richard. File everything, I said. Every document, every signature. I want forensic accountants. I want lawyers. I want every illegal thing he's done in the last 2 years documented and ready. Soraya. And Richard? My voice was steady now. Clear. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I want him to know exactly who he just fired. I hung up, sat in the dark, and smiled. The apartment Maya lent me smelled like lavender in someone else's life. Studio in Williamsburg. Exposed brick. Plants everywhere, the kind that require care, attention, the belief that tomorrow matters. I stood in the doorway for 10 minutes before I could make myself step inside. My phone had been ringing for hours. My mother, my sister, even people I hadn't spoken to in years, vultures circling, hungry for details, for the story they could retell at dinner parties. Did you hear what happened to Soraya Chen? I turned it off. The silence that followed was so complete it had texture. Weight. It pressed against my eardrums like I was underwater. I sat on Maya's couch, beige, tasteful, purchased by someone who had their life together, and stared at my laptop. The one with the cracked screen I'd been meaning to replace. The one that held 10 years of work, of emails, of every piece of evidence that I'd built something real. I couldn't open it. My hands just sat there in my lap, useless. Outside, Brooklyn moved on without me. Car alarms, distant laughter, the Q train rumbling past like a metal heartbeat. Life, continuing, indifferent. I thought about calling someone. Anyone? But what would I say? My husband fired me in front of 100 people, then I went home and discovered he's been systematically erasing me from existence for months, possibly years, and I'm so tired, I can't remember why I thought any of this mattered. That doesn't fit in a text message. The first night, I didn't sleep. I lay in Maya's guest bedsheets that smelled like fabric softener and kindness and counted cracks in the ceiling. 37. I counted them 4 times to make sure. The second night, my mother finally reached me. Maya must have given her the number. Soraya, baby, talk to me. Everyone's saying. I can't, I whispered. Baby. I can't, Mama. I'm sorry. I can't. I hung up before she could hear me cry. If you've ever sat in a room so quiet it started to echo your thoughts, you'll understand this silence. It's not peaceful. It's suffocating. Every thought you've ever pushed down rises up like water filling a basement, and there's nowhere left to run. By the 3rd day, I'd stopped changing clothes, stopped showering, stopped pretending any of it mattered. I wore the same Columbia sweatshirt, Adrian's actually, from before we were married, and sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at my phone. Someone had posted about it on LinkedIn. Anonymous, but detailed. Major shakeup at Lighthouse Media. Founding team member terminated. Sources say internal conflict over strategic direction. Founding team member. Not even my name. I'd already been erased. The comments were worse. People I'd worked with, people I'd helped, people whose careers I'd championed, all silent, or worse, agreeing. Sometimes companies need fresh blood. Can't be sentimental in business. I closed the app and threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, screen intact, still glowing. Still working. Still connected to a world that had moved on. I thought about our last anniversary. 2 months ago, Adrian had given me a card, expensive, embossed, the kind you buy at a boutique stationery store because it's supposed to mean something. To my partner, in everything. Forever grateful, forever yours. I'd saved it, kept it in my desk drawer at the office like a talisman. When I'd cleaned out my desk 30 minutes, one cardboard box, a decade compressed into recyclable materials, I'd grabbed it without thinking. Now it sat on Maya's coffee table, mocking me. I picked it up, read it again, studied his handwriting, the careful loops, the way he'd signed it A instead of Adrian because that's what I called him in private. Forever yours. I tore it in half. Then in half again. Then into pieces so small they looked like snow. I let them fall through my fingers onto the hardwood floor. 40 years old, I whispered to the empty room. And I've lost everything. The words hung there, pathetic and true. I pulled my knees to my chest and pressed my forehead against them, making myself small, making myself disappear the way Adrian had tried to disappear me. That's when I saw it. The edge of something familiar, sticking out of my purse, a flash of cream-colored paper. My hand moved automatically, pulling it free. The letter. Uncle Thomas's letter, the one he'd given me 3 years ago when he'd wired the money. I'd read it once, folded it carefully, and tucked it away, never thinking I'd need to look at it again. Keep this somewhere safe, Soraya. You never know when you'll need to remember what you're really made of. My hands shook as I unfolded it. Inside were 2 things. A handwritten note in his spidery script, and a legal document I'd barely glanced at back then, too relieved by the money to care about the fine print. I read the note first. Dear Soraya, by the time you read this again, you'll probably be in pain. Trust me. I know that feeling. But pain means you're still alive. Still fighting. Still worthy of the fight. The attached document is your insurance policy. Use it when you're ready. And remember, the people who underestimate you are giving you the greatest gift of all, surprise. With love, Uncle T. I read it twice. Then I looked at the document. Really looked at it. And for the first time in 72 hours, I felt something other than emptiness. I felt my heartbeat. Sharp. Clear. Alive. The silence shifted. It was still heavy. Still dark. But now there was something else in it. Something that tasted like salt and iron. Something that tasted like the future. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at that document. Time felt strange. Elastic. Like I was watching myself from somewhere outside my body. The legal language was dense, deliberate. Uncle Thomas had paid for the best corporate attorneys in the state. I remembered that now. He'd insisted. Protect yourself, Soraya. Even from the people you love. Especially from them. I'd thought he was being paranoid. I'd thought love was supposed to be trust without conditions. But Uncle Thomas had known better. Buried in Section 7, subsection C of the amended operating agreement, the one Adrian had signed without reading, because he trusted the lawyers to handle the boring stuff, was a clause so simple it was beautiful. In the event that Soraya Chen is terminated from Lighthouse Media without documented cause and proper board authorization, all intellectual property rights, technology patents, and operational control revert immediately to S. Chen Holdings LLC. S. Chen Holdings. The shell company Uncle Thomas had created, the one I'd signed as sole director, barely paying attention because I was too busy coding our first product launch. The company that now, according to the documents Richard had filed yesterday, owned 67% of Lighthouse Media. I read it 3 times. Then I started laughing. Not the bitter kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep, somewhere that remembers what hope feels like. Adrian had fired me without cause. Without board approval, he'd done it unilaterally, probably showing off for Melissa, probably high on his own power. He'd just handed me his entire company. My laptop was still sitting on the coffee table where I'd left it, untouched. Now I opened it. My fingers moved automatically, muscle memory from 1,000 late nights. I navigated to the hidden partition I'd created years ago, the one Adrian didn't know about because he'd never bothered to learn the system I'd built. Password. The date we got married. Ironic now. The drive opened. Inside, every line of source code I'd ever written, every contract I'd negotiated, every client relationship I'd built, all backed up, time-stamped, documented. But there was more. Security footage I'd archived from our office system, the one I'd personally installed. I scrolled through the files, looking for dates that mattered. There. March 14th, 11:47 p.m. The video showed Melissa in my office, USB drive in hand, downloading files from my computer, my campaigns, my client lists, my strategies. April 3rd, 2:23 a.m. Adrian and Melissa in the conference room, heads close, looking at documents spread across the table. My documents. I could read the headers even in the grainy footage. Soraya Chen, Proprietary Strategy, Confidential. May 22nd. The forged signature on the equity restructuring. I had the original contract, the real one, saved in 3 different cloud systems. The signature they'd submitted to the board wasn't mine. The loops were wrong. The pressure points were different. Amateur hour. I kept scrolling. Email chains I'd quietly archived. Accounting logs showing funds transferred to shell accounts I didn't recognize. Text messages accidentally backed up to the company server. Adrian to Melissa. Once we're rid of her, this will finally feel like our company. Our company. The words that should have destroyed me now felt like ammunition. I opened a new document and started making a list, calm, methodical. Each piece of evidence, each timestamp, each crime. Theft of intellectual property. Forgery. Breach of fiduciary duty. Fraud. The list grew longer. My hands didn't shake anymore. I looked at the clock. 4:47 a.m. In 4 hours and 13 minutes, Richard would file the ownership transfer papers. In 4 hours and 13 minutes, Adrian would walk into his office and discover it wasn't his anymore. I whispered to the empty room, to the ghosts of who I used to be. You shouldn't have underestimated the woman who built the system. Then I picked up my phone and called Richard. I'm sending you everything, I said. Every file, every video, every email. I want it documented. I want it legal. And Richard? Yes? I want to be there when he finds out. Silence on the other end. Then a low chuckle. Soraya Chen, he said, I've been waiting years to see this side of you. So have I said. And I meant it. If you've ever found truth in the quiet moments after pain, you know what this part feels like, that strange, sharp clarity when everything finally makes sense. I closed my laptop. The sun was starting to rise over Brooklyn, painting Maya's white walls gold. I stood up. Showered for the first time in 3 days. Put on the navy suit I'd worn to our first investor meeting, the one where I'd pitched the entire vision, while Adrian smiled and took credit. I looked at myself in the mirror. Same face. Same eyes. But different. Someone who'd walked through fire and came out forged. At 8:45 a.m., I walked into Lighthouse Media through the front door. Security looked confused, but let me through. My badge still worked. Small mercies. I took the elevator to the 6th floor. To his office. The door was open. Adrian stood at the window, coffee in hand, surveying his kingdom. Good morning, I said. He turned. Saw me. And I watched his face change as he realized the woman he'd buried was standing in his doorway. Very much alive. Very much smiling. Good morning, I said again when he didn't respond. Adrian's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. His face cycled through confusion, annoyance, and finally something that looked almost like fear. What are you doing here? I work here, I said simply. Or rather, I own here. He set the cup down slowly, like he was afraid sudden movement might shatter something. Soraya, if this is some kind of... Check your email, I interrupted. The one from legal. Timestamp 2:13 a.m. I watched him move to his desk, my desk, the one I'd picked out, the one where I'd worked countless nights while he networked at cocktail parties. He clicked his mouse, scrolled. His face went pale. The email was simple. Professional. Devastating. Subject: Ownership Transfer, Lighthouse Media LLC. Dear Mr. Chen, per the attached legal documentation, effective immediately, operational control and majority ownership, 67%, of Lighthouse Media has transferred to S. Chen Holdings LLC, in accordance with Section 7(c) of the amended operating agreement executed March 2022. All questions should be directed to Richard Chen, Esquire. Adrian read it twice. Then he looked up at me, and I saw at the exact moment he understood. You can't, he whispered. I already did. That clause, it's not... You can't just... Uncle Thomas's lawyers wrote it. Your lawyers approved it. You signed it. I kept my voice even, conversational, like we were discussing lunch plans. You fired me without cause, Adrian. Without board approval. You triggered the reversion clause yourself. He stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the window. This is insane. I'll fight this. With what money? I asked quietly. I froze the operational accounts at 4 a.m. this morning. Pending ownership dispute resolution. Standard procedure. His jaw worked soundlessly. The company credit cards? Suspended. The line of credit? On hold. Payroll processes Friday that gives you 72 hours to figure out how to pay 137 employees without access to company funds. You're destroying everything we built. The words should have hurt. A week ago, they would have destroyed me. Now they just felt empty. No, I said, I'm protecting what I built. There's a difference. I pulled a USB drive from my pocket, the one I'd labeled at 3 a.m. Fingers steady, heart finally quiet. I set it on his desk. That contains every piece of evidence of intellectual property theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty committed in the last 18 months. Security footage, email chains, forged signatures. All time-stamped, all documented, all admissible. Adrian stared at the drive like it might explode. I have 3 copies, I continued. One with Richard, one in a safety deposit box, one with the SEC, flagged for review if anything happens to me or my legal representation. Soraya. I'm not finished. My voice didn't rise, didn't need to. You have 2 options. Option 1. You accept the ownership transfer, step down as CEO, and sign a separation agreement that includes a modest severance and a non-disclosure clause. You walk away quietly. Melissa walks away quietly. Nobody goes to prison. The morning light streaming through the window made everything too bright, too clear. I could see every line on his face, every tell of the man I'd once thought I knew. Option 2. You fight this. We go to court. Every piece of evidence on that drive becomes public record. Your investors find out, your clients find out, the press finds out, and I still win, Adrian, because I built the system. I know where everybody is buried, because I'm the one who dug the graves. Silence filled the office like water. You wouldn't, he finally said. But his voice wavered. I already sent the email, I said, so clearly I would. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. There was one more thing I needed to say. Not for him, for me. For years I mistook your ambition for our partnership. I mistook my sacrifice for love. I gave and gave until there was nothing left, and you took it all like it was your birthright. I looked back at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. But you made one mistake, Adrian. You underestimated the woman who coded your first product, who landed your first clients, who saved your company when it was drowning. You thought I was support staff. I smiled. It felt strange on my face. Foreign but not unwelcome. I was the architect, and architects always keep the blueprints. I walked out of that office, my office now, and didn't look back. Behind me, I heard something crash, a coffee cup maybe, or a picture frame. It didn't matter. I took the elevator down to the 3rd floor, where Richard was waiting in conference room B with a team of lawyers and forensic accountants. He got the email? Richard asked. He got it. And? I sat down at the head of the table, a position I'd earned, then given away, then taken back. Now we wait. My phone buzzed, Adrian calling. Then again, and again. I silenced it. There comes a point when silence stops meaning defeat. It becomes preparation, power, purpose. For the first time in 10 years, I didn't need him to hear me. My silence had already spoken. And the echo? It sounded like thunder. The emergency board meeting was called for 9 a.m. I arrived at 8:47. The conference room on the 8th floor, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, the one where we'd celebrated our Series B funding, where Adrian had given his visionary CEO speech while I stood in the back taking notes like a good assistant. Today, I walked in first. The room was already tense, board members clustered in small groups, whispers cutting through the air like knives. Investors on speakerphone. Our CFO, Marcus, looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. IT Director Sarah stood in the corner, arms crossed, staring at her phone. When I entered, the whispers stopped. Adrian was already seated at the head of the table. My seat. The CEO's chair. He looked rough. Shirt wrinkled, tie askew, eyes red-rimmed like he'd been up all night, which he probably had, trying to figure out how to undo what I'd done. Melissa sat 2 chairs down, perfectly composed in a cream blazer, blonde hair styled like she was heading to a photo shoot. She didn't look at me. I took the chair directly across from Adrian, set my leather portfolio on the table, folded my hands, said nothing. Richard entered with 2 associates and a briefcase that looked expensive and final. He nodded to me once, then took position standing behind my chair. "What the hell is this?" Adrian's voice cracked. "Soraya, if you think you can just—" "Mr. Chen." Richard's voice cut through like a blade. "I'd recommend you listen before you speak." Marcus cleared his throat. "Can someone please explain why our entire infrastructure is locked down? We have clients calling, contracts at risk." "I'll explain," I said quietly. Every head turned toward me. I opened my portfolio, pulled out the first document, slid it across the table to the board members. "This is the amended operating agreement from March 2022. Section 7, subsection C. Adrian signed it without reading it. His signature is there on page 47. That clause states that if I'm terminated without cause and proper board authorization, majority ownership reverts to my holding company." Silence. "Adrian fired me 3 days ago in front of 100 employees. No cause documentation, no board vote, just his word as CEO. I kept my voice level, factual. He violated the company's own bylaws." The clause triggered automatically. "This is ridiculous," Melissa spoke up, her voice sharp. "You can't just—" "I'm not finished." I didn't even look at her. I pulled out the second set of documents. The security footage, screenshots, the email chains, the forged signatures. These are evidence of systematic intellectual property theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. Mr. Niman. Hartwell. Now I looked at her, and she flinched. "Has been downloading proprietary files from my computer for 6 months. Files she then presented as her own work." I slid the printouts across the table. Marcus picked them up, his face darkening as he read. "The new vision campaign that landed us the Streamflix contract? Mine. The algorithmic content matching system that she claimed to have developed? I wrote that code in 2021. It's time-stamped, version-controlled, backed up on 3 separate servers." Melissa's face lost color. "That's not I was working collaboratively. There are 15 separate instances of file theft documented here," Richard interjected. "Each one a federal crime under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act." Adrian stood up suddenly. "This is a witch hunt. You're just bitter about—" "Sit down, Adrian." My voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. He sat. I turned to the board members, to the investors on speakerphone, to every person in that room who'd watched me build this company from nothing. For 10 years, I coded every product, landed every major client, trained every employee. I worked through miscarriages and funerals and nights when Adrian was too busy to come home. I gave this company everything. My hands didn't shake anymore. They rested flat on the table, steady and certain. And 3 days ago, Adrian tried to erase me. He forged my signature on equity restructuring documents. He gave my intellectual property to his mistress. He fired me to make room for her in my position. I looked at Adrian. Really looked at him. "You didn't just break my heart. You tried to steal my legacy. You gambled everything on the assumption that I was too weak, too loyal, too stupid to fight back. The morning light through the windows made everything harsh and clear. You were wrong." Marcus spoke first, his voice heavy. "Adrian, did you authorize the termination without board approval?" Adrian's mouth opened, closed. "I'm the CEO. I have the authority to." "Not according to the bylaws you signed." Marcus looked at Richard. "Is the ownership transfer legal?" "Completely. We filed with the state this morning. S. Chen Holdings LLC is now the majority shareholder of Lighthouse Media." The room erupted. Board members talking over each other, investors demanding clarification. Melissa trying to defend herself, voice rising in panic. I sat still in the center of the chaos, watching, waiting. Finally, Marcus stood. "This board has no choice. Miss Hartwell, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out." Melissa's face crumpled. "You can't, this is Adrian, tell them." But Adrian wasn't looking at her. He was staring at me, and I saw it all in his eyes. Disbelief, rage, and something else. "Fear." Marcus continued, his voice flat. As for Mr. Chen, given the documented violations and the ownership transfer, I moved to remove him from his position as CEO pending a full investigation. Seconded, another board member said immediately. The vote was unanimous. Adrian's face went white. You can't do this. I built this company. No, I said quietly. We built it, and then you tried to destroy me. I stood up, gathering my papers with steady hands. Adrian, you fired your wife 3 days ago. I looked him dead in the eye. Today, you answer to your boss. The room fell silent. I walked out with Richard at my side, leaving behind the wreckage of Adrian's empire, the one I'd built, the one he'd stolen, the one I'd taken back. Behind me, I heard Adrian's voice, desperate. Soraya, wait, we can talk about this. I didn't turn around. The elevator doors closed on his face. And for the first time in 10 years, I breathed. The first week after the board meeting, I didn't go into the office. I stayed in Maya's apartment, watching Brooklyn wake up and go to sleep through windows that weren't mine. I drank coffee that tasted like borrowed time. I slept 12 hours a night and woke up feeling like a stranger in my own skin. Richard called twice a day with updates. Adrian had hired a lawyer. A good one. Someone from a white shoe firm in Midtown who specialized in corporate disputes and making problems disappear. It wouldn't matter. The evidence was ironclad. The bylaws were clear. The ownership transfer was legal and final. But Adrian was fighting anyway, because that's what men like him do when they lose. They thrash and scream and refuse to believe the world doesn't bend to their will anymore. Melissa was fired on day 2, escorted out by security at 9 a.m., her personal items in a cardboard box, her face blank with shock. Someone filmed it, posted it on Reddit. The video got 40,000 views in 6 hours. Karma is real, the comments said. She stole the wrong woman's work. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I watched the video once, then closed my laptop and didn't look again. On day 4, Richard told me Adrian's investors were pulling out. 3 major backers, spooked by the fraud allegations and the ownership chaos. They wanted stability. They wanted someone they could trust. They wanted me. They're asking for a meeting, Richard said. They want to know your vision for the company moving forward. Tell them I'll think about it, I said. I wasn't ready yet. By the end of week 2, the gossip had spread through the entire industry. LinkedIn was on fire, tech blogs picked up the story. Someone leaked the security footage of Melissa stealing files, and suddenly I was getting calls from journalists, from competitors, from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Tell us your side, they said. How does it feel to take back what's yours? Are you going to press charges? I declined every interview. The truth didn't need me to sell it. Week 3, I finally went back to the office. I took the subway. The same route I'd taken for 10 years, except this time I wasn't rushing, wasn't checking my phone every 30 seconds, wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's dreams on my shoulders.